This is why it's so important to be positively oriented in your life experience, because when you're positively oriented in your life experience has to improve because of your positive orientation. No matter what it is that you want to see improvement around, you can have it. Welcome to Worthiness Wednesday. I'm Perry Gruber, the Enlightenment Guy. For over a decade, I've helped people master their mindsets so they can create lives they love and get results without the burnout or the hustle. And in this episode, I want to talk about two clients of mine. Two clients who are in a 20-year marriage and the experience they recently had that caused what they would perceive as destabilization in their marriage. But what was actually happening was a fantastic state of expansion. And here's the thing about relationships, particularly marriages. Marriages, like human beings, are expansionary experiences. They're constantly becoming more. And oftentimes, people experience that becoming more as negative, which is what happened with these two clients. The more that relationships become, just like everything else in physical reality, is happening in order to encourage the individuals in the marriage themselves to become more, to expand. And so oftentimes human beings in marriages would prefer marriages to stay the same, but nothing can stay the same. Everything has to change. It's the state of all that is. All that is in constant change. And so marriages are no exception. But because people sometimes enter into marriage in states of insecurity, the marriage helps them soothe that insecurity. It gives them a sense of security on certain subjects, such as, am I lovable? Or can I find a partner? But underneath that false sense of security remains insecurity. Like, what if my spouse meets someone else who they love more than they love me? Or what if my spouse believes that our relationship has become stale and they want something different? Or what if my spouse changes and as a result no longer wants this marriage? These kinds of beliefs often underlie marriages, which cause instability, because any below 8 momentum, any negative momentum is going to trigger experiences associated with that momentum so that the person experiencing the experience can do something about that momentum. And that's exactly what happened in this marriage. So these two people, the husband and the wife, I've talked about before. The husband is now a master of the practice, and he moves through his life with grace and ease, but he also has insecurities, as does his wife. Of course, that should be obvious because two people who meet up in a relationship that turns into a marriage tend to be a perfect match to one another. And so the same things that are going on in one person are often going on in another person. It may look different, but it's essentially the same thing, and that's the case here. So the husband, who I'm going to call Kyle, I sure hope I remember that as I go through this story, and the wife, who I'm going to call Mary, so Kyle and Mary. The husband is a musician. That's not his full-time job. He wants his musicianship to become a full-time job, but he's using the practice to soothe his resistance inherent in beliefs that have him thinking he has to have his full-time job as kind of like a project manager, because he doesn't believe his musicianship can generate the income that he gets from being a project manager. But he's constantly getting accolades and expressions of appreciation wherever he goes to perform his music. And so he's gaining more and more evidence that perhaps he can generate income sufficient to replace his project management job. So that's Kyle. His wife, who I'm calling Mary, I hope I said that before. Mary is a stay-at-home wife. She once was a career professional, but she decided at some point long ago that she needed to stop working because of the stress she was experiencing, and she kind of had a mental breakdown long ago. Now, as a result of the positively focused practice, she's becoming more and more empowered in her life experience. Now, there's a lot of momentum of various subjects in this marriage that was having this marriage be very rocky for both Kyle and Mary. At one point, Kyle decided to separate from his wife for a couple of years, not because the marriage had gotten bad or stale, but because he believed that he wasn't following his purpose and had gotten to the point where he wanted to commit suicide. This is right when he became a client of this practice. The wife, Mary, was already a client of the practice about a year before he decided to come back. So he came back into the marriage, and they both resolved that they were going to use the practice to improve their marriage. Now, at this time when they made this resolution, this is such a good story. It's kind of a long story, but it's a good story. When they decided to make this resolution to improve their marriage using the positively focused practice, right about that time, they were having sex. Maybe it was very infrequent, less than once a month. And a lot of that had to do with Mary's self-perception. So both of these people are large individuals, and that alone makes the logistics of sex a little difficult. But in addition to that, Mary has some really strong belief momentum that has her show up in sex as not a very good partner. She often panics in sex. She believes she's being suffocated in sex, even though that's not happening. And because of a lot of sexual abuse from her past and some incest, she has a whole bunch of disempowering stories about that practice. And so that's the predominant reason that they hadn't been having sex as frequently as maybe some others. But in addition to that, because of the experiences that Mary had in her past, she also believed that she was unworthy of having a robust sex life. Now, remember what I said earlier. Both these two people are a perfect match. So there has to be something going on inside of Kyle that has him creating a version of his wife that is the way she is. And he does. He criticizes her. He doesn't do this out loud, but he criticizes her in his mind for not having her shit together. And whenever she has an episode in their bedroom experiences, he blames her for it. Now, most people would blame their partner if their partner appears in observation to be responsible for the sex not happening. But the positively focused framework and the fundamental spiritual principles which underlie how physical reality works, which is what is the basis of the positively focused framework, asserts that if you're in an experience and you're having an experience of sex and your partner appears to be being a certain way, that's on you. You're creating that version of that individual. And that's what I told Kyle. And so over the last, it's been about a year and a half. No, it's been about 2 years. Over the last 2 years, I was working with Kyle to create a better version of his spouse, of his wife. And after a year of doing that, at the end of the year, he came to the session and reported that they had had sex pretty much every week, 52 times in the previous year, as a result of him creating a better version of his wife. And when I talked to his wife, Mary acknowledged the same thing. So both clients were very excited about how they had transformed their marriage. Not only had it been transformed in the bedroom, but also outside of the bedroom. They were more affectionate toward one another. They were desiring to be around each other more. And other things were happening, indicating that the relationship was improving. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Whenever you expand into a new level of conscious awareness, evidenced by a manifestation that you've wanted. I'm going to say that again because it's really important that you understand what I just said. Whenever you expand into a new level of conscious awareness, a new state of vibration, evidenced by receiving a manifestation. Within that manifestation, there's going to be contrast. There's going to be experiences that cause you to reach for something even more. This is the process of expansion. Whenever you reach a new level, the experiences you experience in this new level are the rocket fuel that will have you want to go to the next level. And that's what was happening in this relationship. This dynamic, this is a fundamental spiritual principle. This dynamic has shown up in every client's life, and it also has shown up in my life. You are constantly expanding. And when you get to a new level of expansion, within that new level of expansion, there's going to be contrast that's going to cause you to want to reach for even more. Human beings tend to describe contrast as negative. And when you focus on the contrast that exists in your new state of awareness, if you are not aware of the beneficial purpose of contrast, you will focus on the contrast, the negative experience, and then you will stymie, you will slow down your expansion. And if you focus too much there, then you'll start to sort of go backwards. You'll start to align. You're still expanding. It's not really backwards. You're still expanding. You're just expanding in a direction that is off your trajectory of your desires. So it's still an expansion. You're just expanding into probable future realities that contain more and more of what you don't want. That's what happens if you begin to focus on the contrast and you don't interpret the contrast in the positive light that it is. So that's what was happening in Kyle and Mary's marriage. They had gotten to a point where they rendezvoused with a probable future reality that had become their now, which contained an improved version of their marriage. This is where it starts getting good, as I said a minute ago. Now, these two people were really enjoying their new state of marriage, and the sex was getting crazy. It was like they were starting to have sex every day of every week, which showed that they had come into an expanded version of their marriage. This is when the contrast showed up that created the opportunity for them to take their marriage to the next level. And the contrast that showed up was this. One day, at an open mic, Kyle was out performing. And at the end of this performance, this woman approached him. The woman's name is Kelsey. The woman approached him and explained to him, to Kyle, how great she thought his music was. She introduced herself as a musician and asked if it would be okay if they performed a duo that night. My client agreed. Kyle said yes. And so they practiced 5 minutes or so there in the bar, and then they got up and did a performance. Kyle enjoyed that opportunity, that spontaneous rendezvous. It was not a coincidence. It was a direct manifestation. The contrast, it was contrast showing up. That's what Kelsey was. Kelsey represented the contrast that had the opportunity, that presented an opportunity to both Kyle and Mary to take their marriage to the next level. I think you got a sense of where this is going. So Kyle did this performance with Kelsey. And at the end of the open mic performance, he thought, wow, this might be a really good opportunity for me to be able to perform in venues that I might not be able to reach otherwise. This Kelsey person represents an opportunity for my expansion in my music. And when he said this to me in session after that performance, I agreed with him. I thought it was a great opportunity for him to have that experience. But I said, don't limit yourself to just Kelsey being a new avenue, because you're the creator of your reality, not Kelsey. And he agreed. So a little later, maybe 2 weeks or so, he shared the news of his meeting Kelsey to his wife, Mary. And given everything that I've told you about Mary, I'm sure you can imagine what her response was. Her response was catastrophic. Instead of seeing this contrast as a positive thing, she couldn't help but conjure thoughts from all that is that told her Kyle was going to leave her. This woman and Kyle are going to create an intimate experience performing together, and as a result of that, they're going to have sex, and then he's going to leave Mary for Kelsey. I'm going to be abandoned. What am I going to do? I don't have a job. All of these kinds of thoughts were swirling around in Mary's head. Now, you have to understand the thinking process, how thinking works, to really see what's going on here. Mary has dominant negative momentum about her worthiness on a number of subjects as a result of the experiences she's had in her past. These things she still needs to work through. And this marriage, when it had gotten to this improved state, was now ready to reveal to her what I just told you. But Mary couldn't see that because the momentum, the strength of the thoughts and beliefs she was having were overpowering her. Now, where do your thoughts come from? Your thoughts occur to you not as some process in the brain. What happens is you are vibrationally aligned to a particular frequency. It doesn't matter what the frequency is, but when you align yourself to a particular frequency, this is how the thought process gets underway. When you align yourself to a particular frequency, you attract to you thought forms. And those thought forms, they're non-physical energy essences, just like you are a non-physical. You're attracting to you by the virtue of vibrational harmonics. You're attracting to you thought forms that are aligned with whatever frequency you're tuning to. That's how your thinking process happens. And as the thought forms gain more momentum in the relationship, the harmonizing between your vibration and its vibration, then it will manifest in your brain. Your brain's a transmitter receiver. It'll manifest in your brain as a thought. That's how thinking works. And if you keep thinking that same thought over, if you stay in that vibrational frequency and you strengthen the harmony between you and the thought form, momentum will ensue until that thought becomes dominant in your awareness, which then begins to create the physical reality you experience. And when that physical reality experience is created and you observe it, then the thought recedes into the background of your consciousness and becomes a belief, and then it becomes true. That's why I say there's no such thing as objective truth. It's all based on whatever beliefs you have. So Mary had a lot of disempowering beliefs about herself, and all of those vibrations became active when her husband told her about Kelsey. Now, my client Mary is a pretty good practitioner of this practice. So she knew she had to do some vibrational work, which she began to do. But then she has another subject that she has a lot of dominant momentum on, and that is her mother, the relationship she has with her mother. And her experience in the past has been to regularly go to her mother and kind of vent with her mother on subjects that she feels displeased about. Oftentimes when she has those kinds of conversations with her mother, sometimes it's her mother initiating the conversation, sometimes it's the daughter initiating the conversation. But whenever they have these conversations, sometimes the person who didn't initiate the conversation will be able to talk the person who initiated the conversation back up into a higher frequency, a higher vibration. The mother is a client also, by the way. But sometimes the opposite is true. Sometimes the person initiating the conversation, the daughter, for example, will share the information, the subject that she's talking about, and then the mother will amplify how the daughter is feeling. And that's what happened here. In other words, I call that collapsing into the momentum of another person's belief momentum. That's what happened here. So the daughter, Mary, contacted her mother, and it's so interesting how this subject resonated with everyone involved. When Mary communicated what was happening between Kelsey and Kyle. Now, remember, the only thing that happened was that they performed once at an open mic. When Mary described this to her mother, she knew what I'm about to say about her mother, but she was totally oblivious to it. Her mother has had similar experiences that her daughter, that Mary has had. She too has rampant sexual abuse in her family tree. She has been raped a couple of times, and the men that she has rendezvoused with have been less than savory characters. She's also had experiences, as she tells it, where every man she has tried to have a friendship with have ended up wanting to sleep with her. And so she has a particular belief orientation around male-female relationships, around females, and around sex. And so when Mary shared this experience with her mother's dominant momentum on the subjects I just told you became active. And when Mary described what was happening between Kelsey, to her knowledge, between Kelsey and Kyle, her mother confirmed it. She said, "Oh no, you don't want your husband performing with that girl, because performing music is one of the most intimate experiences on earth, and they will definitely end up sleeping together." And that caused Mary to go even further into negative emotional territory. So by the time she had come to her session with me, Mary was in a state of powerlessness. She couldn't help but panic around the possibility that her husband would end up performing with this girl, forming an intimate relationship with this girl, and end up having sex with this girl, and then ultimately leave Mary. The momentum of that imagination that I just described was so strong in Mary, it brought her to tears, and she almost had a panic attack right in our session. She couldn't see, and I was striving to tell her, that instead of talking with her mother, it would have been better for her to check in with her broader perspective and realize that the reason why she was feeling so negative about this is because she was perceiving it differently from how her broader perspective perceived it. Her broader perspective knew that think about it, you guys. Prior to Kyle telling Mary about Kelsey, Kyle and Mary's marriage had gotten far better. It had gotten to the point where they were in almost bliss with regard to the marriage. Sex was happening every day. They were spending more time together. They were enjoying their time together. The relationship had gotten to the point where now both Kyle and Mary could take their marriage to the next level. And in order to take it to the next level, Mary had to get over her insecurities, which is exactly the service that Kelsey was providing. But what Mary did instead was she went to another woman, someone who she resonates with, her mother, who has similar vibrational momentum on the subject of men and women in relationships and sex. And when she did that, her mother collapsed into her momentum and affirmed for Mary her own fears. And that caused Mary to tank. Now, it's been about 4 weeks since that experience happened, and Mary is in a much better place as a result of coming to her sessions and discovering that no, her marriage isn't at risk. It's actually the best it's ever been. And because it's the best it's ever been, she's now getting this opportunity to use the marriage, what the marriage is giving her through Kelsey, to see in herself more aspects of herself that need to be cleaned up in order for her to move her and her marriage to the next level. In other words, Kelsey is an angel bringing opportunity to both Kyle and Mary. Now, for Kyle's side of this story, when Mary tanked like she did, Kyle began to point the finger at Mary for not doing the practice, for not having her shit together. And the challenge, what what I told Kyle in his sessions was, you can't blame Mary for what she's doing. This is you creating a version of your wife that can either affirm your belief that she doesn't have her shit together, or it can affirm that the version of your wife you're creating is improving, which is exactly what was happening. But he couldn't see that. He couldn't see that Mary wrestling with her, I want to say below 8, but you guys don't know what that means. Mary wrestling with her negative emotion. He couldn't see that Mary wrestling with her negative emotion, her negative momentum, her negative beliefs, her insecurity, all of that wrestling was positive. He couldn't see it. All he could see was his wife didn't have her shit together. Now, there's a whole lot more I could tell about this story. It's a long story, and it's ongoing right now. But what you can see up to this point, and I'm going to end this video shortly, what you can see is the experience of relationship and the fears that we bring to those relationships shape our experience of the relationship. And if we allow our negative interpretations, I just had another conversation with another couple. The members of that couple are also clients. One is a master, the other is in intermediate practice. They too very recently had a very similar experience to what Kyle and Mary are experiencing, and their relationship is off the charts good. If you bring negative interpretation to an experience you're having, you're going to color that experience negative. And then if you do that and observe that negative experience is going to become worse because you're creating your reality through your attention, your thoughts, your beliefs, your emotions, your intention, and your attention. This is why it's so important to be positively oriented in your life experience, because when you're positively oriented in your life experience has to improve because of your positive orientation. All of my clients are understanding this, and the example I gave today is an advanced version of the contrast that's available that makes relationships and our individual lives better and better. It's so good. Do you want to see improvement in your life? No matter what it is that you want to see improvement around, you can have it. If you want to work with me in order to get that, I've included links in the description of this video where you can test drive a one-on-one with me. Or if you're ready to go, there's a link in there where you can book time on my calendar. Whatever you do in the meantime, I'll see you in the next video.